With your host, Andrew Donaldson. This is Heard Tell.
Welcome back to Heard Tell. Okay, fresh face, new topic. We don't talk a whole lot of sports, but sometimes it bleeds over into culture and politics. And boy, this short story sure did. He's a contributor at ordinary-times.com. Also writes a couple other places writing about football and things like that. Good guy. Occasionally makes pizzas. Sometimes he even gets paid to do so. Good guy about food also. Ben Sears, how are you, my friend?
Doing very well. Thank you for having me on.
Thrilled to have you on. You're writing in Ordinary Times. Okay, let me just tee it up this way. So you have 2 of the 5 national championship holding coaches in college football basically going at each other in the media. This doesn't happen a whole lot, but when it does, this has been pretty spectacular. Turn the noise down for us. What's going on here? Because we have Nick Saban, we have Jimbo Fisher, used to be buddies. They're from the same part of the country. There's a long history between these two fellers. But turn down the noise for us. What's actually going on here and what got it to the point that it's actually crossing over into regular media now?
Well, the funny thing is that you say they used to be buddies. Back in LSU, and I can't remember if it was 2003 or 2004, but either way, they won a national championship together. Jimbo was the offensive coordinator for Saban, and they did quite well. A couple of days ago, Jimbo's calling Saban a narcissist, telling him despicable, saying that everybody that he's ever worked with would kind of back him up on this, and saying that there's a reason why he'd never work with him again. Unfortunately, you can go to 2018 and you can see Jimbo waiting for an hour outside of the locker room for the national championship Alabama team to say what a great job Saban did and to congratulate him. This is a weird situation. I've not seen, you don't want to say popcorn time, but I've not seen 2 guys go at each other like this. And Sankey, the SEC commissioner, seems to have shut it down. It was about to get better when Lane Kiffin was scheduled for the Dan Patrick show, and you can only imagine where that would have gone, because Lane Kiffin is one of the more interesting voices, specifically because he doesn't say what he's supposed to say. One of the most interesting voices in college football. And then on top of that, you have the unaligned now Steve Spurrier, who came in and said, basically, Saban didn't say anything that was untrue. Saban said specifically what happened. So you've got this weird situation where Jimbo Fisher is having a very, very bad reaction to people pointing out that what he did is what he did, and it was legal and it was fine. It's just not exactly the spirit of the law, but nobody's saying he broke any rules. He's saying that Saban is accusing his players of breaking the rules, but my reading is that that's just not the case.
Now, of course, we're talking about the ability of players to license themselves. This has completely changed college sports because now there's a ton of money. The accusation, you took to it in your piece in ordinary-times.com. The accusation has been as well, it's always been this way. Now it's just going to be out in the public and we're going to know who's paying who. You kind of detailed this article to the people who thinks the whole system's corrupt. I'll be honest, I'm one of them. We have the long running joke with our LSU friends of they ask what kind of season they're having. I was like, I don't know what's your salary cap this year. This is stuff that's been going on for years. Let's just be adults here, especially in the SEC. Everybody accuses everybody. There's been some really ugly investigations into specifically SEC schools over the years. We can go back further before yours and mine day. Of course, Southern Methodists and the death penalty and all that. We know there's a lot of ugly stuff in college athletics. We know money is the root of a lot of that ugly stuff. Is that the case, though? Is it just all corrupt and everybody's getting paid, or is the truth a little more nuanced than that?
I just don't think it's as corrupt as people think. I'm not saying it's not corrupt. I do think that there's money exchanging hands. There's people enticing people to go to places where they otherwise wouldn't go to. But as I wrote in the Ordinary Times piece, imagine you're a college player who thinks you're going to be the greatest pro ever, and it just doesn't work out. What's your second option? And your second option to me would be to go to sports broadcasting. So if you go to sports broadcasting, now it's you in competition with everybody else that ever put on a jockstrap, and you need to separate yourself. So why, considering all of the busts in the history of college football, why hasn't there been just this overwhelming, I don't know, well, it should be waves of people sitting there and busting the story, doing the great whistleblower and saying this is what college football is. And we've had a couple small, but they were never backed up. This is an amazing cover up if it doesn't exist. And so I do kind of think that the idea that college football is corrupt is overblown. I'm not saying that there isn't, there aren't dollars handed over under the table, or the what do they call it, the $100 handshake at the end of the game. You got a touchdown and somebody shakes your hand, and then you walk away with an extra 100. I'm not saying that's not happening. But I just don't think it's to the extent that it is expected to be.
Ben Sears, writer at ordinary-times.com, joining us, talking a little college football that's spilled out into a lot of other areas. You kind of answered your own question in your own piece here, though, because you said if there is corruption, you went to a comparison that's probably a little harsh for college football, but some of these coaches, I wouldn't doubt they'd probably kill over it. You talked about organized crime, the Omerta, the Sicilians, and we're not talking about the Princess Bride ones that just do logic games with cups of poison, although Saban probably would try that with certain people. You never know. You're talking about the Omerta. Would it have to be a code of silence thing? Now, I think the coaches probably have that the coaches know, everybody knows where the bodies are buried. That's a close-knit fraternity. Everybody knows each other. There's not that many of those guys at that level. But I kind of agree with you. I don't think you could keep all the staff quiet. I don't think you could keep all the players quiet, all the people at the boosters. They're all attention-hungry people. I think the whole thing's corrupt, but I want to hear you out on this because I agree with you. It's like, that's a lot of people to try to keep quiet about something, isn't it?
Well, I think Lane Kiffin said he was speechless after what Jimbo Fisher said. I don't know which way that works. Does that mean that he was speechless because they have this code of silence or not? But it was kind of tongue in cheek. But the whole idea of Omerta and this code of silence among criminals is that you never say anything, you never speak. But they back it up with actual force, whereas there's none of that in college football. So I would wonder if there is such a culture of not criminality, I guess, but such a culture of rule breaking. Why hasn't it come out? It doesn't make sense to me. You've got so Kiffin comes out and says he's speechless. I think the greatest interview that we'll never see was Kiffin booked for the Dan Patrick show because Kiffin wanted to speak the Saban versus Fisher argument, and Sankey, the SEC commissioner, shut that down. He came in. He said this argument ends, and it's probably for the right, but I would have loved to have heard that. I just don't think that that the Sicilian Omerta comes close to what we've got right now in the SEC or college football, period.
We'll continue with our friend Ben Sears, more about this Nick Saban, Jimbo Fisher, college football and culture thing right after this. It's Herd Tale continues. Let me ask you this. We've been talking about Jimbo's comments. Let's talk about Nick Saban for just a second. There's been some criticism of his side here, of course, and of course, again, let's be adults. Everybody's got their dogs in this fight because, everybody loves Saban or hates Saban because he's the top guy for a long time now. He's got all the rings. Part of the argument against Saban here is like, look, when you're that guy, you're the all-time winningest coach. You're the gold standard. You cannot go on TV and do stuff like that, irregardless of whether it's true or not, irregardless of the facts of the case. When you're that guy, you can't do this publicly. Do you think that's a fair criticism? And to be fair here, you're an Alabama guy, but at the same time, is there merit to that argument?
I'm an absolute partisan, and there is definitely merit to that argument. I think Saban just didn't consider what he was doing, but at the same time, I don't think Saban was saying anything about Fisher or about Texas A&M or about Deion Sanders, because we forget that he was also included in this. Saban's got a habit of commenting to the press and saying things to people beyond them. When Saban's upset that his team is being told that they're the greatest thing the world's ever seen, he goes to the press and he talks about rat poison. He talks about that, and the message is not for the press. It's not for me. It's not for you. It's for his team. I think Saban went to the press and he said something in the sense that he was doing that. He said, "Look at what Fisher did. Look at what Texas A&M did. Look at what Deion Sanders has done at JSU." And I think he was speaking in a larger sense to the NCAA. He was saying, this is broken. This is a guy, and this is another thing with Saban. He has repeatedly pointed out rule changes that he doesn't like, and people have said he's complaining because he's going to lose his tactical advantage or something like that. But instead, what's happened? I mean, you look at the transfer portal. Instead, what's happened is he's taken it to his advantage. He has repeatedly said this is going to alter college football. And a lot of people think that this was him complaining, but I think in a lot of ways, this was his warning. The transfer portal is the perfect example. You've got to see the offensive weapons that he got this year. He's got the number 2 running back in the nation, I believe. He's on hinge to get the number 1 wide receiver. He's got 2 wide receivers from in conference to add to his team. He's got a tight end that'll blow your mind. I personally, like we said, I am a partisan. I kind of wish he would have paid attention to the offensive line, but he knows what he's doing better than I do. But he has consistently looked at rule changes, and he has objected to them, and he has consistently been told that he's complaining. And then when the rule changes actually happen, he's demonstrated how they can be manipulated, because it's not his fault. Once you have a rule change, you have a rule change, and he's going to play by the rules. I feel like Saban, looking at this with Fisher, is screaming to the world these collaborations. Instead of taking individual boosters, they're kind of getting together, putting together a bunch of money, and then you come to a team. You have a base salary. You sign with the team, you have a base salary. You can still do the name, image, and likeness, but as Greg Sankey told Yahoo Finance, so the SEC commissioner was talking to Yahoo Finance. He was looking specifically at just flat out payments. They're not even doing ads. And that's paper thin, because all they have to do is say, come spend 5 minutes at this car dealership and smile. Here's a picture. Now you've done an ad. And you can pay somebody whatever they want. I think Saban was, again, giving out a warning, because from what I've read, Alabama's putting together their collective.
Yeah, and we saw this with USC too, which has been mopping the floor with people with the transfer portal, which, again, nothing against Oklahoma, but LA, Oklahoma, college football, you've been writing about college football for a long time. The traditional powers are always, the same traditional powers from the 60s and 70s pretty much are the traditional powers now, with a few exceptions. You get an Oregon every once in a while where somebody just dumps a ton of money into them. But, USC, Ohio State, Alabama, these are the traditional powers. And when you give the kids the option, which is what these are doing with the transfer portal and now the money on top of it, how much of this is just math of like, hey, the bigger the name of the school, the more money I'm going to make? Doesn't that just come down to a lot of this? Because we're seeing it with USC. We're seeing it with Miami starting to get good. I bet you Miami doesn't have any trouble getting kids in the transfer portal. You get go, and I'm look. I don't like Miami. I'm an old Big East guy. You know, I was at the game when Randy Shannon got hit with a trash can. I was standing 20 feet from it. Okay, like I don't. I'm just saying, and that was too far, by the way. I'm just saying, those are the power schools. If you're going to start giving kids choice, which is what the transfer portal does, and you start giving them money, which is what the NILs are doing, they're going to flock to those big name schools anyway, because that's where the money's always been. But it's been that way for 40, 50 years. Maybe we're overreacting a little bit, and this is just going to have to shake out a little bit.
Well, my thought of, you say USC. I think a big part of USC's bump is coming from the fact that that Riley quit at Oklahoma and he went over to USC, and he took some players with him. And I think the expectation is that they're going to be great. Now they built on that. I think USC is going to be a giant in the next couple of years. But otherwise, yeah, all of the big schools are going to do well. But what was pointed out with this Texas A&M thing is that A&M has, forgive me, half of Texas, because you're going to hate me for this, but you're an 8-14. You always have been. There are the occasional years where something's great. So how did you do this? How did you sign the #1 recruiting class in the nation? How did you pull the 2 top recruits out of Tennessee, where you've only pulled 2 recruits out of Tennessee in the history of your program? How did it? And this is the most interesting. There's a defensive tackle. God, I think his name is Nolan. Okay, so a defensive tackle, the #1 defensive recruit in the nation, is from the Memphis area. I can't remember if he was on the Mississippi side, but anyway, it was the Memphis area. And suddenly his dad gets a job in Knoxville. And oh my gosh, we all know he's going to go to Tennessee. You know, college has an awful underbelly, but we're looking at it and we're seeing it. It's like, all right, probably can't prove it, but somebody pulled some levers, and this is going to get this kid to sign from Tennessee, and then he doesn't. So whatever it took to get this kid from Memphis to move 400 miles away with his family on the eve of his signing was not enough to keep him from signing with College Station at Texas A&M. And Texas A&M, you know, they were above board. This is why this Jimbo Fisher thing is so weird. They were above board. It looks like they spent about $25 million getting players to come there, and they say they didn't buy them. My thought is, if I was last year's class, I'm pissed off. I'm like that AT&T customer that says, "Well, why don't I get a free phone?" Because you're attracting new customers. And I don't get it, but I do think there's just all sorts of oddities with that class. There were 3 or 4 other 5-stars that did it, and A&M did not have many 5-stars in their history, and I think they got 5 or 6 this year.
Yeah,
what
but
changed?
again, the money, that's all allowed now. There's nothing illegal there. They're not cheating, and that's the whole trick to this thing, is because everybody's like, well, they paid them. And we're all kind of ingrained to be like, oh, you're not supposed to pay players, but this is all completely allowed now. And I think they're going to crack down after this year. I think they're going to start putting some bumper rails on this, like the bowling alley. They're going to have to. But right now it's the Wild West. Jimbo didn't do anything wrong here. So it's kind of like, all right, Saban lost his mind, Jimbo lost his mind, but there's really no wrongdoing, at least letter of the law wise here.
Well, see, that's what is so weird about this to me is Saban flat out said, beforehand, or we didn't give anybody any guarantees beforehand. He says that Fisher did, and Fisher went nuts. But according to the rules right now, why? Fisher was completely within the rules. And if you watch that, did you watch? I don't know if you watched it. It's a 9-minute.
You can't miss it. It's everywhere.
Well,
it's not I'm a man, Mike Gundy, but it's way up there.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm a man. See, that's a great contrast, because the I'm a man, Mike Gundy, he was mad, he was angry, he went forward. I thought Fisher was defensive, and I don't understand why. He was he could have just as easily come out and say, you know what, that's right, and just moved on.
I think it was because it was Saban, and it's just if it was anybody but Saban, it probably wouldn't have cut that way. But that's my humble but accurate opinion. I think Saban just took something that was about a 3 or a 4 and cranked it to 9. But that's just my opinion. Ben Sears joining us, ordinary-times.com. He's wrote it. One of my favorite titles we ever done, even though we don't want to do a niche title, but this one was too good. I let it go. Title is, wouldn't it be great if we could drag Gene Stallings into this? You got to be somewhat Alabama proficient to know what that's about. Go read it, ordinary-times.com. My friend, real quick, tell people about what you do. You also do Poets Day every Friday, which is one of my favorite things we've started doing lately. Let people know where your social media is, and also your other writing, and maybe a little bit about your pizza making prowess, my friend.
Yeah, Poets Day is one of my favorite things. I'm a huge fan of a particular author out of Scotland. His name is Ian Rankin, and he writes police procedural type things. And his officers have something called Poets Day, which is piss off early, tomorrow's Saturday. In other words, they just get out of the office as early as they can. So what I've done is I've featured a poet, but before I feature the poet, I find a scam, some way for you to trick your way out of the office or out of school or whatever it is. I think it's fun. It's stupid and silly. And then sometimes I actually analyze the poem. Sometimes I just throw it out because it's a good poem and it doesn't need me. Otherwise, I've written about food and wine at various places. Show up at Roll Bama Roll. I used to be a regular there, but I'm kind of backing off that right now, just for no other reason than I did 140 posts over there about food and wine, and I kind of ran out of ideas. There's a new guy over there, and if I can plug him, the guy's name is Bakhtian, and he's fantastic. He'll be coming around next football season. So, yeah, I'm writing here, there, and wherever I can. It's fun.
Yeah, Ben SYS on the twitter.com. It's right under him there on the lower third graphic.
Can I mention real quick on the SYS?
Yeah.
MSYS? Because my youngest son just asked me about that today, because I've still got that. Years ago, I had a website called Might Stain Your Shirt, and that's MSYS. I was watching a James May special, and he hated a wine, and he was talking to the winemaker, and his friend said, "You know what? I know this winemaker. You can't say anything bad about this, even though you hate it." And he said, so when he was talking to the guy, he says, "You know, this might not stain your shirt." And it occurred to me that great things might stain your shirt. And so I lost that website because I stopped paying attention to it, and now it's some Korean gambling site. But MSYS.
Good stuff, my friend. Ben Sears, make sure you're reading his writing. Really clever, creative writing. He has a way with phrases. Like, you got to read this. One of the comments on Twitter on this post about Alabama and the Nick Saban thing was actually like, "I don't know anything about sports, but the writing's so good, I still like this." So that's a pretty good compliment, my friend. Ben Sears, thank you for the time today, sir. Appreciate it.
Had a great time. Thank you.
Thank you.